welcome back to another episode of Sports and Spiritual Things. I'm Dr. Andrew Patton. Please like, share, subscribe, share all of that, man. I'm so glad that you clicked on this video, and I'm telling you, this episode is going to be epic because we're going to talk about something that probably in certain respects has gotten tired as it relates to sports commentary. But since we're not just a sports commentary show, we are sports and spiritual things, we want to take the term GOAT, or greatest of all time, and juxtapose that with the scripture that I love in the Gospels, where it's asked, the greatest among you, let him be a servant. I want to talk about that from that perspective. Mr. A to Z Sports, live from A to Z Sports right here, or make that A to Z Studios. I know of a sports show called A to Z Sports, so I ain't trying to hijack your studio. But I'm telling you, man, this topic is going to be interesting. And I'll start with the spiritual component first, because in society, we like that term GOAT. It was coined by a rapper that we all know and love, who's legendary in his own right, in the incomparable LL Cool J. And he talked about it from that perspective, GOAT, and maybe he didn't coin it. Maybe it was something he heard in New York. I don't know. I maybe did do my more research. But from what I can remember, it was always something that I heard LL Cool J say. And to his credit, I think he might be one of the greatest of all times when it comes to rappers, because of his persona and what foundation he laid for hip hop. And he tells his story so powerfully. He talks about how in his first deal, he didn't even know he had a deal. He was just rapping, hadn't even signed a deal yet, technically, because he was so new to the music industry. He was 17 years old when he got into it. And his story is amazing. The way he kind of really talks about his career and just his not only his persona, but just the way he communicates and how he's really clear and concise about not only the industry itself, but his stake and his contribution to the art form. So from that perspective, I think that when you look at it from not only the spiritual component, but also the sports component, we've done this with Tom Brady. We've done this with LeBron James. We've done it with Michael Jordan. We've done it with Wayne Gretzky. We've done it with boxing even. And how we come across, or at least how we create this narrative, or even how we canonize and make one sports luminary a Jesus, so to speak. And look, I'm not going there to say we shouldn't do that. No, that's not this kind of podcast. I'm not trying to condemn or trying to, really get it back to the point to where it's sermonic, even though I can go there. Trust me, that's what I do. I'm Dr. Patton for a reason, right? I preach. But here's the truth. When I look at this subject matter and I break it down in my own head, and I look at all the sports that I've covered or I've watched most of my life. I'm 48 years old. I ain't ashamed of that. And to some of you young folks that's watching this, oh, he an old head. You gonna spew some names I ain't never heard. That means you need to get your weight up. Because if you're going to have this conversation with me, if you're going to like, share, and subscribe, or send me an email and tell me where I'm wrong, you best come with your facts, because I'm definitely going to decode it. I'm definitely going to put you in a situation that's going to make you either study or be mad, or even not follow me or not listen to me. And I don't want you to not do that. I don't want you to do that. Even if you don't like me, I still want you to like this and share. Please do that for your boy. But I think it's interesting, Mr. A to Z, that when I look at Michael Jordan, I look at LeBron James, I look at Wayne Gretzky, I look at Tom Brady. When you start to talk like that, not only are these guys the most accomplished in certain respects, when we start to kind of, when I think about the movie The Matrix, I can't remember if it was one or two, but there are certain young people that are in the room, and they're like, who are these people? Oh, these are the potentials. That's the one. Right? Neo's standing right there. He's considered that guy that's the one. But they don't know if he's going to really make up his mind yet. They don't know if he's going to lean into his greatness, so to speak. But with that being said, and even from the last episode, when we talked about the pressures of being next, when you are not only next, but then you prove yourself, and now you're in a conversation of greatest of all time. Let's use Muhammad Ali. The Jordan stuff and LeBron debate is obvious. I'm not going to go obvious yet. I'm going to get there. Trust me. I'm going to dissect that thing, and I'm going to let you know what I really think. And you might like it and you might not. I'm not going to go all Nick Wright. I'm not going to go Stephen A. Smith or any other Skip Bayless, not Scott, but Skip Bayless or any other guy that can argue for or against. But I'm going to definitely be original. That I can promise you. But let's start with Muhammad Ali. Because what's interesting about that, Mr. A to Z, is this. For some reason, with the swag, if you remember the first episode, I kind of mentioned some of that with in that episode, the Gospel of Deion, or the Gospel according to Deion, the Gospel of Deion Sanders. I can't remember what I called it, but you get it. You'll find it if you go look for it. But it's interesting because when I compare the boxing game, Muhammad Ali or Sugar Ray Leonard, Sugar Ray Robinson. Here's a name that many of you probably ain't never heard of, or maybe you have. You just don't talk about it because he's been dead for so long. Jack Johnson or Archie Moore. See, when you are an aficionado, or if you are a boxing fan, or if you're just a sports fan. Now, I'm not a boxing aficionado. I'm not even going to tell you that because, I didn't see Bud against Spence. I ain't watched that. I didn't. I don't spend the money on pay-per-views no more.
I didn't watch it either, but that was a beatdown.
Yeah, it was a beatdown. I saw. Look, I did go and look at the highlights. Now I was just going to see what happened.
Me too.
Because $80, $100. I remember when pay-per-view used to be about 32. That was cool. But now, they hazing. They not playing. They gonna start charging money if you just click on it and think about ordering. That's how they gonna figure out another way to make money. But what's interesting is with Muhammad Ali saying, I'm the GOAT, and him saying that, we believe that because he coined it, right? He was the first boxer to really have that swag like that. And not only predicting when he was going to knock guys out, but doing it. And being one of the most skilled heavyweights of all time. Is he the greatest of all time? Greatest boxer, greatest heavyweight of all time? Depends on how you really quantify that. Well, why do you ask that, Dr. Patton? I'm glad you asked. Because, and I'll get to the spiritual component in a minute, that I can promise you. I'm not going to beat you over the head too much with it, but I will get there. But let me set up the sports component, since that's what you're here for too. Because I know I got that segment of the church that want to only hear the sports. I get it. I got you. But understand it from this perspective. When we say that somebody's the greatest and they don't even have the most wins, and Muhammad Ali does not. Or if I look at Sugar Ray Robinson and Archie Moore, in particular Archie Moore, who fought well into his 40s. Or if I look at Sugar Ray Robinson, who won 174 fights and was champion in several weight classes. Muhammad Ali's claim looks different to me. It does.
And that's for me.
Well, that might be. It might be. If this is the spiritual show, in Bible times, maybe the Hebrews are ready to stone me for what I'm saying. And maybe the sports fans, I'm used to that, trust me. They might be ready to stone me for what I just said. And maybe Ali is the greatest for other things other than boxing, what he stood for, the things that he did. And I get that. And I ain't mad at you for that. But my challenge to you is this. What does the result say? What does the record say? Joe Louis held the belt for 12 years. So did Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson was the reason why there was a lot of racial tension. Well, it was racial tension in America anyway, but with the whole sports and Great White Hope thing, that started with him. There was fighters that would even, the white champion at the time would even fight him because he knew he couldn't win. That's why he didn't fight him. The color line was just a thing just to hide behind. But he knew he couldn't win. Or even with years later, when Joe Louis is allowed to fight for the title. You seen the movie Cinderella Man about James Braddock, and it's very poetic. But the truth of the matter is, Braddock makes sure he made money off of Joe Louis the rest of his career because he knew what time it was. Yeah. So when you think about it from that perspective, and you talk about greatest of all time, what purpose does it serve? Let's get to the spiritual. I know you was waiting for it. I know. But when Jesus comes on the scene and says, look, I'm God in the flesh, in no uncertain terms, and he's opening eyes and he's feeding people. He is doing all these great things. He's at 12 years old even, already running circles around Pharisees and around men that were learned and had at least on paper. Now, he was God, so he was older than them anyway, but they didn't know who they was talking to. But that's another discussion for another day. But by and large, if we just look at it from the humanistic side of it all, he's 12 years old, and he's outfoxing. He's out debating grown men. So from that perspective, he takes on this stance where he says, I don't come to be served. I come to serve. I'm the greatest of all time. I'm the first and the last. Okay, I ain't trying to preach. It's coming out like that, but forgive me. Just give me 30 seconds and I get back to the sports. I promise you. I'm the beginning and the end. I'm the Alpha and the Omega. That's what he says in the book of Revelation. He declares that. Literally, he just basically saying, and don't go Kirk Franklin how y'all did him when he had the rap verse and he was talking about Baphomet. No, he was talking about the euphemism of hip hop of the GOAT. Shout out to Kirk Franklin, by the way, who I met once. He may not remember it, but we did meet. Cool cat. May not always agree with what he does, but I ain't supposed to. Nobody agrees with everything I do either, so whatever. But when you put it in that terms, greatest of all times and servitude, the greatest of all time gave his life and decided to humble himself, as Paul goes on to write, empty himself. And then he took on the form of a servant, the scripture goes on to say, right? How does that juxtapose to sports? I'm glad you asked, because here's the truth. Most times in our humanistic endeavors, the people that are great really want to serve something bigger than them. And I'm not saying that sports luminaries don't do that, because they do. I think that Muhammad Ali really recognized that. If you want to put the greatest of all time on him for that, then yeah, I got it. But if you're going to just go record for record, fight for fight, I beg to differ.
Yeah. And I'm a Floyd fan.
Okay.
Right? And for him, if you notice, he doesn't say the greatest ever. He says the best ever.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, but we know that you handpicked the last set of your fights. And I get it. It was done to you. But it's like, well, Andre Ward is right up there with you.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? He went undefeated. Yeah. He didn't hide from nobody or run from nobody. Yeah. And so, when you think about, like, every chance he gets, actually, I didn't even mean to go here already.
Go ahead.
But it's like, Proverbs 27:2 just came to mind. And it was a question like, should you call yourself a GOAT, or should it be other people calling you the GOAT?
Well, that depends, because as we talked about before, I can't fault anybody for having the charisma, because now on the other side, now watch this. When Jesus shows up in John 10, he says, everything that came before me was wicked. Right? So from that perspective, that kind of declaration is true. It's only wrong or bad when you can't back it up. That's the difference.
Got you. But Proverbs 27:2 says, let someone else praise you and not your own mouth, an outsider, not your own lips.
I got it. And that's fair. But here's the other thing. The scripture does also say, let your light shine so that men can see your good works and glorify the Father in heaven. Does that mean that if I'm letting my light shine, whether I'm talking or I'm just doing what I do, should I, like Jesus said in that same parable, or in the Sermon on the Mount, he's saying, if I put my light under the bushel, then that's not the place it needs to be. In fact, if the candle was still lit and something's there, it's going to set it on fire and burn the whole house down. So from that perspective, I love theology from a space of interpreting scripture with scripture, but two things can be true at the same time. So if we go back to the sports component of it all, what Muhammad Ali was really announcing was that when he beat Sonny Liston and nobody really expected him to do so, he had to go to a place that only he could go to from a psychology standpoint to be able to pull it off. So from that perspective, and even though, Muhammad Ali is not a Christian, right? We get that. Now, for those that are watching it, but he ain't no Christian. You know how people do.
Oh, of course.
I know you watching. I see you. I see you. It's all good. But what he stood for was bigger than the faith that we may disagree with.
Yeah.
Because the things that he was saying, some of the evangelical pastors were not saying.
Yeah.
At least if they were saying it in private. Because, Billy Graham and Dr. King was cool privately.
Yeah.
Catch that. And not to bag on the late Billy Graham, no shade. I'm just saying from a space of understanding for those that may be there. And I'm not saying that you are. Maybe if you ain't, great. I ain't mad at that. But again, as you said, there is a decorum for when you speak about yourself and how you speak about yourself. I just watched that movie that Jamie Foxx just starred in, The Burial, depicting the life of Willie Gary, the guy that became he wasn't Johnny Carson before Johnny Carson, but he began to get that same notoriety because of a particular case that he covered, that the movie covers, right? So from that perspective, he was very flashy, but man, he went 12 years not ever losing a case. That's how good he was.
Yeah.
So to me, when you are good, there's a certain persona, there's a certain thing you get to say because of that. Now, moving away from that, I'll put it this way. When we look at, you mentioned Floyd and what he did and saying, I'm the best ever, not the greatest of all time. Really, to me, and I had a good friend of mine say this, shout out to my brother, Mac Glaze down there in Dallas, Texas. One of the things that was funny was that he said, Floyd may not be the greatest boxer, but he's the greatest businessman. And I was like, you know what? I can see that. Yeah. You know why? Because he bet on himself and bought himself out of his contract.
Yeah. That
was at $750,000 to now make $750 million.
Yeah.
And for a guy like Floyd, I mean, we could argue when there's two golden eras, in my opinion, of boxing. That's the 50s and the 80s, maybe somewhere in the mid-70s when Sugar Ray Leonard is coming up, and then all those great middleweights and heavyweights was out there. And it started to kind of tail off after the 90s, to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But when you go into the 80s, you ask yourself this question: could Floyd Mayweather survive in the 80s? Because we had a conversation about basketball a lot of times. We were talking before the show. We were talking about Gary Payton talking about, in this era, I would be shutting these guys down and like, no, you'll be getting cooked and you'll foul out because the way you play defense, you can't touch people no more. Yeah. And you didn't have the jump shot that the average point guard has now.
Yeah.
Right? So then you got to ask yourself this question. You say, hey, could Floyd fight in the 80s? Could he beat Sugar Ray Leonard? Probably not. Would he beat Marvelous Marvin Hagler? Probably not. Could he stand up to Thomas the Hitman Hearns or Roberto Duran? Probably not, because his daddy didn't. You could make that argument.
Yeah.
I mean, I could be totally wrong, and it would be unfair to Floyd because he was a kid. He wasn't even, he was just a little kid when his dad was fighting, right? Yeah. And no disrespect to Money May, because, from a business standpoint, you can't be mad at him because, a lot of boxers that had those wars, they can't even count to 10.
Yep.
Not only does he have the bag, but, he could live a comfortable life.
Yeah.
Ain't mad at him.
Yep.
When you watch the documentary, I watched the documentary about Don King and how his rise to prominence and his shady business deals. And he wasn't the only one. Bob Arum, a lot of those guys were shady.
Yeah.
It was a part of the business. It's like the music business. I remember that scene in that movie Brown Sugar with Taye Diggs and Sanaa Lathan where he's talking about starting his own company to my man, these deals are this way and half those deals are shady. And then she looks at him like, yo, I mean, all these deals are shady. Right? So it's the same deal. Yep. When you are Floyd and you serve the interests of entertaining people, but you take care of yourself, that's fair. Now, spiritually, that looks different, but not necessarily, because he's not God. When Jesus is saying that, he's saying it because he's God. And the greatest of all time argument, when you start to get into basketball or you start to get into football, we only quantify it by titles. How many championships do you have? And that's where it veers off the rails, because let's go basketball now. See, now we can go where you thought we was going.
Right.
We done been to the Bible. We done been to boxing. Now you can go where we really thought. I've been waiting on you to get to the NBA with Jordan and LBJ. Welcome to the show. You probably fast forwarded just to hear this part.
Right.
Okay, so from that perspective, when you think about it, right? Mm-hmm. Think about it from a perspective of Wilt Chamberlain, one of the most dominant big men to ever play the game. At 16, Wilt Chamberlain technically is using another name by the name of Chris Marcus to play basketball in Philly. Yeah, I didn't know that until I looked it up. Interesting. At 16, he's scoring 40 points on grown men. I'm talking about good and grown men. And all of them wasn't 5'10" and white. You know, that's the narrative that a lot of people like to say with Wilt's dominance, to really dumb it down.
Yeah.
And that would mean you don't know basketball.
Yeah.
From that perspective.
Yeah, I didn't know that, honestly.
Yeah.
I learned something new.
Yeah. You keep fooling with me. You'll learn some stuff. I'll learn you some things, as the old black man would say in the South.
Right.
Learn you some things in Atlanta. But the thing about it is the dominance of Wilt and him not even being considered the GOAT or even in the conversation, because of that, is pure ignorance.
Yeah.
You know, you only watch the game in your era. And players do this. I just mentioned GP, whom I love and respect. But sometimes you get your era gets canonized. And guess what? Before his era of coming into the league in 1990, the guys from the 80s and 70s said the same stuff.
No.
They did. Because the truth was their time had passed them by, and like any old competitor, they couldn't get out there and do it and prove whether or not their era was better. Because time has passed you by. And so with that perspective, then you get into Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Honestly, who's probably one of the more decorated ball players. Outside of titles, we're talking about dominance from middle school to the pros.
Yeah.
High school, college, and the pros. Who has a resume like that? In college, you're not even allowed to play as a freshman. But the 3 years that you play as a sophomore, junior, and senior, you're 88-2.
Yeah. 3 national championships.
Yeah. 3 most outstanding players in the Final Four, and the not the Wooden Award, but the Naismith Award at the time. You so good that your coach get the trophy named after him, and it should be named after you. When you think about it.
That's a fact. Yeah.
So when you start to have those conversations,
and then even if you talk about GOAT, like a lot of people would say, even if you talk about championships, everybody says Bill Russell should be the GOAT because he has the 11. But it's like, well, if you compare the two, one had more talent on his team to have help compared to a Wilt.
Well, that argument too gets underplayed and overplayed in certain respects. Let me put it this way. Wilt Chamberlain could score 50, 60 a night. And it's only 8 teams in the league.
Yep.
So really you got the best of the best that make the league at that time because the league is, it's smaller. So most times people will say, well, you got 30 teams, 32 teams in the league now. Of course, it's going to be harder because the talent is spread out a little bit more. So that could be a knock on Bill. But at the same time, here's where you can make a case for him. In those 11 titles, 2 of them, he was the actual player coach. Who's done that? When you think about it from that perspective. Right. And the late Bill Russell, who's my fraternity brother, by the way. Shout out to all the brothers of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. Yes. Yeah, I'm one of them. I'm not denouncing. Pray for me. Okay. I'm not trying to be, I'm not going to be violent. I'm going to be saved and sanctified. They just turned it off again. I lost some shouters right there, as the Baptist preacher would say. But honestly, what's interesting about Bill is that he's a winner too. Right. And his story, he's a candidate, not because of just the titles, but he was Ben Wallace before Ben Wallace. 6'9", 6'10", that could control the game defensively and mentally. Yeah. So, no, he's not scoring 50 a night, but he and Casey Jones at the University of San Francisco win 2 national championships. The Dons ain't been relevant since, and that was in the 50s.
Yeah.
They made a couple of NCAA tournaments, but they ain't had a Casey Jones and they ain't had a Bill Russell.
Yeah.
Bill gets to the Celtics, and he revolutionizes the game by blocking shots, and not only blocking them and not throwing them in the third row, but keeping the ball in play so that Cousy could start the fast break. Now, they didn't invent the fast break. Now you're about to get into my basketball nerd stuff. Hello, John McClendon, the late John McClendon, who coached at Tennessee State and coached at, I can't remember the other, North Carolina A&T in North Carolina, who was one of the first fathers of the up and down game of basketball. In fact, there's a documentary that I would strongly recommend that you watch called Black Magic that ESPN did back about 15 years ago or so. And it chronicles the black college basketball experience and pre-integration and guys like Ben Jobe and John McClendon that was one of the early pioneers of fast break basketball, and not Paul Westhead and all those guys that get the credit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I'm one of those dudes, and ain't no shade on it because they don't write that. They don't write, guys like Doug Moe and those kind of guys that do things like that. They're not responsible for what people write. But at the same time, for those of us that know better and know that Bass Reeves is the real Long Ranger, we know those things and we ain't mad at it when people canonize things. Same thing with, the GOAT conversation, going back to Bill Russell, right? Understanding that you win in college like Kareem, you dominate a league, and you do it in a city that doesn't like you really, right? People that break in your house and defecate in your bed while they're smiling in your face and they didn't want you in their neighborhood, right? That's a different pressure.
Right. That's a different level.
Yeah.
Like that as you were talking about him, I was like, that honestly, you would think would separate him as a GOAT.
Yeah.
Like he should be number one. For that reason alone.
He's definitely the greatest winner. You can't take that away from him. Now, when we say greatest player, that's different because he's not better. He's not even better than Wilt.
Yeah.
He's not better. Now, it was said that in his time, they always tried to say, because of the time, the racial times, Cousy was the guy. And when Cousy retired in 63, he went on to win more titles. That kind of shut that argument down. Yep. In particular, when he got older, and shout out to Red Auerbach, who basically hired him as the first black coach, and he did it intentionally, right? Branch Rickey gets a lot of credit for, quote unquote, integrating the league. But when you really study that whole thing, the league was never really integrated for real because you had black players before Jackie Robinson, when you really understand the story for real. Yeah. Or if you read $40 Million Slaves by Bill Rhoden, formerly of the New York Times, who tells you of a man named by the name of Rube Foster, who wanted to basically not only have a player integrate the league, but the teams. He wanted ownership, and white baseball said no. We'll take a player, because the plan was always to take the talent but not give you ownership. But that's another discussion for another day. I mean, but when you understand the history and the times, right, you got to perform doing that, right? You got to, some arenas, some cities you go in, you can't even stay with your teammates. That's a whole nother dynamic mentally that you got to deal with. So, greatest winner, greatest players, two different things. Yeah. Because titles can't quantify that because that's a team sport.
Yeah. Even if you think about like the players from this era, right? And it's like, again, it's the whole LeBron Jordan conversation. But it's like if you look at the luxuries that LeBron has today, from the sports medicine team, from the private jets now, from all the different advances in science, all this stuff.
Diet,
all that, right? Compared to a Jordan who, like, it was normal for them to be smoking and drinking and go out and play ball.
He talks about that in The Last Dance, by the way.
And not having private planes to be able to.
Flying commercial.
Flying commercial. That's when they first. That's when they started having that stuff. So it's like you have to interject that part into the whole, because there's like different comfort levels. Like today, the past 10 years, well, really the past 5 years, they stopped having them play so many back-to-backs compared to in the 80s and 90s.
And guys are still doing load management, but go ahead.
Yep, exactly. So it's like there was no load management.
Right.
There was no the physicality level from just a brute force is different than it is today.
You got my wheels turning though. I don't think that, and the scriptures, this is a spiritual component. Come on in, guys. Come on, don't leave. Like, share. The Bible says in Ecclesiastes that there's nothing new under the sun. I think there's always been load management to a certain extent. Maybe not to the point to what it is now, but somebody has always chucked the system. You know, somebody's always done it. Even at the end of seasons with 8 teams in the league in the 60s, right? 50s. You know, I'm sure that somebody, if they were ahead by 20 games and the playoffs was going to start, you don't think that maybe somebody sat and didn't play as much that game because it was meaningful, or you didn't pull guys out the game when you were up 30?
That's actually that would be a good conversation to really dive into.
I don't know if it's completely like Kawhi Leonard load management. I don't think it's like that, but I think there is a degree to that to a certain extent.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, because, like, you know, I think about I just when you like think about, again, the different eras, right? And again, you say, like, one thing that I was thinking about, like, with the eras being different, right? Yeah. So you have LeBron James, who surpasses Kareem,
right?
But Kareem only shot 1 3-pointer,
right,
in his whole career,
right?
And LeBron has shot hundreds.
Thousands,
right? Which now gives you the leg up on. So it's like you really can't. It's hard to compare. Like, it's hard to compare.
Not necessarily, though, because even at year 19 and 20, Kareem was just hanging on. He wasn't even the main focal point on that 88 and 89 finals appearance. In 89, they were swept by the Pistons, right? I think he did average double figures, but James Worthy was the MVP in the 88 finals.
But just saying, from the scoring, not being the man on the team, but from a scoring perspective.
Yeah.
Like how it honestly almost took LeBron the same amount of years as Kareem to get that mark with the addition of 3-point shots.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
know what I'm saying? And then you think about, like, the other question is, like, does Jordan surpass Kareem if he doesn't retire twice?
Possibly.
Right? So then,
but whose fault is that?
Well, I know, but I'm saying, and then if he doesn't retire, does LeBron catch Jordan? Right. So it's like, that's why you really can't have GOAT conversations.
Well, hold on now, because in Michael's defense in that regard, Michael had spent 3 years in college and still scored 30,000 points, and that was taking, quitting twice. So you gotta consider that, but you also have to consider this. Vince Carter played 21 years in the NBA. So did Kevin Willis. There's some guys that they're not many, right? Yeah. But they didn't contribute at the level that LeBron has. LeBron was in the conference finals last year.
Yep. And
at times was the best player on the team. And I think that they're trying to circle the wagons and really make sure that the offense goes through AD. And I think that that's going to be the key, because if they are going to break through and maybe get one more title, AD is going to have to be the one that leads to little children. He's going to have to, because he's 30. LeBron's 39.
Yeah. 39
is still 39, dog. Regardless. It's going to catch up with you. You don't know when. It caught up with Tom Brady, right? I saw Steven Jackson say this. He said that Father Time ain't undefeated. He said it's the mindset that leaves you. And I'm just paraphrasing. Maybe I got it wrong. But he said something that was really powerful for an athlete to say, to understand that the mentality is different when you get older. Because when your body can't do it anymore, then you got to fit. Like with Bird, he played on guts the last 3 years of his career because his back was jacked up.
Yeah. Well, they say the same thing about Jordan.
Yeah.
With the Wizards was his knee.
Yeah.
He was playing on one knee, really.
Yeah, guts. Still averaging 20.
Yep.
On a bum knee.
Yep.
Right? So think about that. Now, he was a volume scorer. Now, I could really pick that apart. But I got to respect it, but I can pick it apart. How do you have Jerry Stackhouse and Rip Hamilton on your team and you don't want to pass the rock? That's why you hired Doug Collins, because you was trying to recapture your Chicago days from like 84 to 87. Yeah. That was 25, 26-year-old Jordan. Not 38, 39, 40-year-old Jordan, right? Yeah. So from that perspective, goes back to something I said earlier, where while we argue eras, And then going back to, let's get to the servitude part, because when you're great, you understand you got to make others better. Not that Michael didn't. He went about it a different way that I would maybe respect a little bit more, because I saw this. Somebody said this, one of his teammates, B.J. Armstrong, said this. He said Michael needed to be the guy that he was for us versus if Michael was that guy with the Wizards, it didn't work. One, he was older, and then those guys were younger. They weren't going to go for that. LeBron can win 3 titles in 3 different cities because LeBron's leadership and the way he plays the game it fits anywhere. It does. It's proven. So from that perspective, that don't make him the GOAT per se, but you have to strongly consider that no player in their prime of their career, even all the guys that we can mention, can't say that I was the focal point on 3 teams and we won championships in one of the most competitive eras in the league history. That's fair. Yeah, you can say 6 finals losses, but who are those 6 finals losses to?
I mean, a challenge that I could give is
go ahead.
He stacked his team in all of them, right?
Hold on now.
No. I mean, if let's, because this is one of the conversations I like to have about LeBron. Like, you think about Jordan, right? Jordan put in the work, honestly, to really
absolutely
uplift his teammates. Like, if Jordan doesn't say, "Yo, Scotty, you're not going home this summer," after they lost to the Pistons the last time. No, we're gonna sit here and we're gonna improve. And then Horace Grant's like, "Yo, I'm gonna be there too," and the 3 of them lock in.
Yeah.
And then they dominate for the next 3 years.
That's right.
And then Jordan leaves. So does Grant. And then they come in, they just bring in Rodman. And then they dominate for another 3 years.
Yeah.
Right? With the different supplemental pieces.
Some of them were Pistons, by the way. Shout out to Zeke Thomas. Go ahead. I love Isaiah Thomas's real critique of that era, by the way. And Charles Oakley, he's so funny when he says this. Charles Oakley is very matter of fact about his opinions, right? Mm-hmm. And you got to respect Oak. One, because he can knock you out, and he won't do that. I mean, I don't think he get nothing out of knocking me out. Yeah. He's definitely a gentle giant. He don't take no stuff, which I could definitely respect because he's earned it right. But he always surmises that he said that he didn't like that Chicago became Michael's town. I don't think that has anything to do with anything, because he just played high school basketball there and grew up there. Because the Detroit loves Isaiah Thomas still to this day. Right? Where you play is going to give you the love, right?
That's right.
But let me go back. I don't want to lose this, because here's the part that we got to make sure we understand. Mm-hmm. Because the draft, the 84 draft, again, considered one of the greatest drafts, at least in the top 3 between 96, 84, and 03. We can fight about that, but they are definitely up there, right? So when you think about that, look at the drafts that follow that. Number 1 pick was the first lottery pick was Patrick Ewing in that draft, right? Then the next draft is the cocaine draft, basically. Like in The Last Dance, when Michael was talking about all these guys getting drunk and that was the league.
Yeah.
All Michael had to do was stay sober and not get high.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an advantage in itself. Now, I ain't no shade, I ain't mad at him for doing that. Of course he should. Because it's about winning. If you find an opponent that's gonna do that kind of stuff and you know it and you got that kind of intel, I'm gonna go the opposite. I'm gonna do something different. And then you look at the 87 draft. Reggie Miller was a decent player. He wasn't an all-star. I mean, he was an all-star, but he wasn't he's not considered one of the all-time great 2 guards. He's not Dwayne Wade. He's not Kobe. Jordan had the fortunate. And even though Ron Harper was in that conference, he got traded out of that conference because we forget about Ron Harper. We forget about Mitch Richmond. John Starks was a decent player, but he was rocky, okay?
But you can, I mean, and then we just said it in the previous episode.
Sure.
Like if Carmelo goes to the Pistons.
Different story.
different story about even LeBron's story.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's like there's so many different variables.
Nuances, yeah.
Right? You think about like jumping to football.
Yeah.
Tom Brady. If Drew Bledsoe does not get knocked out of that game.
He never gets in the game. And nobody trades for him because nobody knows if he can play.
Yep. So it's like,
or Brett Favre, who gets they bring in this guy named Billy Joe Tolliver to back up. I can't remember the starter. What was that? You from Atlanta? What number 12 was it? Chris?
Hold on. First, I'm not from
Atlanta.
Okay,
my fault. Okay, you ain't from.
I've been here for a minute. I live here.
Okay, you just live here. But I can't remember the starter. I want to say it was Chris. It wasn't Chris Chandler. I could be wrong.
Because Chris Chandler came after that. I do know that. That was like 98.
Yeah, that's the one that went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But there was a number 12, too, during that 91, 92 era, in that particular era. So look it up and see. I don't know. Maybe we can figure it out. But whoever that quarterback was, Brett Favre is on that same roster. Same roster. Second round pick. Jerry Glanville didn't even want him. That was the coach at the time. So they bring in this guy named Billy Joe Tolliver, who turns out to be just a journeyman at best for his career. You trade Brett Favre, and the next couple years, Brett Favre is 3-time MVP in a row, en route to a Super Bowl. That's just how crazy this stuff is. Now nobody considers. Was it Chris?
It was Chris Miller and Billy Joe Tolliver.
Okay, Chris. I knew it was a Chris. So, with that being said, that 98 team, and this is back from another previous episode where I said if you watch the 91 Falcons and you compare it to Colorado, it's the same kind of scenario because that's what Deion was around. He's kind of recreating that to a certain extent on top of some other stuff he may have seen in professional sports and college sports even.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the bravado. It was the team, because that Atlanta team upset the Vikings that had a young Randy Moss in his rookie year with Chris Carter.
With Randall Cunningham.
Randy Cunningham
and Randall.
Randall was the backup.
And Robert Smith as the running back.
That's right. Randall was the backup at first until Brad Childress. No, was it Childress?
Brad
Johnson. Why am I saying Childress? That's a coach.
They were a field goal away.
Yeah.
Yep, I remember that.
Yeah, I was upset because I loved Randall Cunningham back then.
Me too.
So it's like, bro, when you think about how close this stuff is, and then we start talking about GOATs on team accomplishments, what if Jim Kelly wins 4 straight Super Bowls instead of losing 4 straight? What's the conversation then? Even if he don't win more than 4, but winning 4 straight, that's a different. Now, and even with Tom Brady's 7 Super Bowls, 3 of them are questionable.
Exactly. I was about to say that without the cheating Belichick.
Well, I don't know about the cheating thing. Maybe it is. I don't know. I mean,
nah, you've heard players say that they were recording their walkthrough.
Yeah, I got that. I got that. But here's
you have Spygate. I mean, it was proven Spygate.
Yeah, that's proven, and the phone gate.
Right. So
Deflate gate.
There's proven facts that they cheated.
Well, but hey, I'm from this. I went to a HBCU, right? And we have a saying there.
If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying.
There you go. Or it's better to cheat than repeat. But okay, we supposed to be Christians. Okay, pray for us. But I'm just saying, I do it. I'm just saying I understand. That's all I'm saying. I ain't saying you should do it.
Yeah, that's like Tracy McGrady said in the interview. Like he thought about resorting to steroids to help him heal better, but he did it. Now, if you believe any of the stories coming out of Miami about LeBron, with him, and
I can believe
caught up in some of that stuff because it's like I heard someone. Because it's resurfaced.
Ray Lewis, the deer antler spray thing, the injury. I don't know if I don't even know what that stuff is. Again, I ain't never played the game at that level.
Yeah.
I sprained a couple ankles a couple times, took some Tylenol with the sleep. I don't know what they have to deal with because athletes in that regard, man, they are otherworldly.
Yeah.
They earn every dime. And even if they do a little something to do what they got to do, really, I just want to see the show anyway.
Because it's like you think about, like, everybody talks about Barry Bonds, but like King Griffey, like the kid.
Yeah.
He lived up to expectations.
You're right.
And to be the only the only one to be unanimously voted into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Right? And he's like, and he talks about like, hey, my hard work. If my hard work can't get it here, I'm not gonna cheat.
Yeah.
But it's like, and you always hear about all the cheaters, but very rarely do you hear them really push Ken Griffey.
But because Ken Griffey's career, kind of like with Tim Duncan and the Spurs in their era, right? We don't talk about Tim Duncan as a GOAT candidate per se. I've heard a couple people say it.
As he should.
I wouldn't go there. He might be the most fundamentally sound big I've ever seen. He played a lot of years, and he was tough. He was a warrior, and he was one of the cogs of why LeBron don't have more titles too. You know, so I get it, but he ain't the GOAT. He ain't even in that conversation.
But he should, though.
He's a top 5 big man.
He's the reason that they won them.
Yes, he is.
Right? And then if we talk about, again, tying into to spiritual, like he sacrificed.
Sure.
So that he can make the team better.
As David Robinson did too, right? I mean, that's why that team was what it was. And David was able to really affect that culture with his faith and how he moved. And we'll talk about some of I promise you, we'll get into some real spiritual heavy stuff with some other episodes, but this is just the early stuff. But from a sports perspective, when you begin to talk about GOAT conversation, it's really bad because we forget that these guys really serve a bigger purpose. Kind of like with Jesus, right? When I opened up with that statement, I'm not coming to be served. Guys like LeBron, they get that. I don't think Michael Jordan got that very much, or Wilt Chamberlain did. I think Bill Russell did, from a space of going down to Mississippi and helping people to register to vote at a time when people was getting killed for doing that.
But I'm always challenged with that because, like, Jordan did stuff that a lot of people don't know about.
True, too.
You know what I'm saying?
True that.
Like,
true
that's
that.
been even, like, everybody's like, well, LeBron, I was like, well, like, again, everything about LeBron has been crafted by a narrative. There's a lot of stuff, like, a lot of people don't know that a lot of, once Jordan created the Jordan brand or once he got in place, he put a lot of black people on those executive teams.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's just as important, if not more important, from a standpoint of voting for a black candidate or endorsing a black candidate in North Carolina. Even though that could be important, it is important. Or saying that Republicans buy,
But the frustrating part about that is, too, though, is nobody wants to listen to his answer, right?
Yeah.
Because he said the reason why I didn't champion this guy, man, basketball was my life. So I wasn't even educated to give an opinion on it.
I buy that. But I think, too, when you have that kind of clout and cachet and somebody comes to you with that, you could probably find out.
But but let's talk about LeBron in China.
Okay.
Well, LeBron had an opportunity to stand up for Daryl Morey,
right,
and stand up for people that were being affected by what was being done over there.
Sure.
He did Chinese people buy my shoes.
Right,
too,
right. He made a business decision
without saying it out loud.
Fair.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like, again, that's why, like, and we even had this conversation, and maybe, and this is what we kind of close with, is like, should we even have a GOAT conversation?
No.
Can people just be great in and of themselves, and we just celebrate each individual greatness?
I think that's better, because even Michael Jordan has said that, right? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, guys that actually played the game that we discuss and we debate. For us, it's great talk.
Yep.
It creates content.
Yep.
But those guys, all of them, even if we agree or disagree with what they should have did from a social justice standpoint, opening social economic opportunities and those kind of things, or being spokesmen, because we're used to that in this country. We used to this, the guys with their fist up, Juan Carlos and that, I can't remember the other guy's name off the top of my head, but what he did and what they did at the Mexico Olympics in '68, it was important.
Yep.
It cost them a lot. Guys like Brent Musburger said some stuff that when you reach, he called them, he said something to the effect of them being black stormtroopers, something crazy. Yeah. It had a lot of racial undertones to it.
Yep.
How dare you guys do this?
How dare you say you're the son of God?
Yeah. Where when you go through those, can you bring that in full circle, right? How dare you tell the truth? How dare you step outside of the box or the narrative that we've created? And so, and not just African-American athletes, but anybody that takes a stance for what's right or what they deem is right. Colin Kaepernick, where people disagree, you know, or you could defend the Klan or any other extremist group that has the right to assemble, but a guy takes a knee or a tire leak. Now they've even got it put out there where you can't do it at all. You know, that's that they killed that animal while giving $400,000 to, you know, minimal. That's like $400, like $40 compared to a $1 billion industry or league several times over. But that's another discussion. And I'm a social justice guy, by the way. Not the way you think, though. I'm not extreme in it. I'm not extreme in anything. I'm very reasonable in my opinions and how I form those things. But I'll say this. When you understand, as you said, asking the question, should we be having that conversation? It's really no, because the players are saying that. Now, if we were to go by position, who's the greatest center of all time? That's different, because it's hard to maybe take championships out of that discussion totally. It could be considered, but how a guy plays the game, who's got the most points, the things that really you can measure, rebounds, that kind of stuff that really an individual controls in the game is how you really do that. And it should be a position thing more so than an overall player, because I don't think a guard, to a certain extent, could ever have the same impact as a center on the game if it's done right. Now, in this era, you can argue that, right? Because Jokic don't protect the rim.
Yeah.
Okay? Giannis, to a certain extent, but he's still kind of finesse, right? Because he handles the rock. He could lead the break. He's a one-man fast break.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff that Jokic and the big men today does, Shaq could have done. He just didn't do it. When you go back and watch the tapes, Shaq was very like, man, wow, that guy got handled, right? I mean, the gracefulness of being able to spin off a guy either way, left or right, and go and catch it. B. Shaw throw it up, he dunks it. You know, Penny do it to him. I mean, it was like, that's out. I mean, dude, that's crazy. To be 7'1" and you're that agile. And Shaq will tell you, had he been in shape, this is a different conversation. Shaq knows that. And you know what? I respect him for saying that.
Yeah.
Because he knows he left some meat on the table. He does. But he still scored just a shade under 30,000 points. And that's spending 3 years in college.
And being hurt.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when you start to really have those conversations, and you look at it from a position, you look at it from not only a social impact, but a business impact. We said it in the previous episode. When you see what guys have done, the doors that are open, this generation is different. You know, they still want to win. I think that it's unfair to say some guys don't want to win in this generation only, but that's always been. There's certain guys that's going, hey, man, I made it. I'm one of the 400 in the world that's got this job. I'm going to milk this bug as long as I can.
Yeah.
Come on, Ben Simmons. You know, those kind of guys. And I ain't mad at them.
Yeah.
Why am I going to be mad at them? But, hey, this has been Sports and Spiritual Things. I'm Dr. Patton. Like, share, subscribe. I know we didn't get too far into the whole Michael and MJ thing. We didn't want to. We just wanted to really be true to the show and what we stand for, which is making sure that we can merge sports and spiritual things, mainly our Christianity, our Christian faith. And as we wrap up, if you're watching this episode and you're like, man, you guys made some great points, or I disagree, or why it's got to be about Christ? Why it's got to be like this and then the third? I get it. You got this far. Maybe some things we said did pique your interest. Maybe even if you don't know Christ, or if you do and you walked away and it's like, man, I got to rededicate my life. I got to get myself back on track. Hey, you know what? One of the things I've discovered, even in my own walk, in some of my days of being lost or wayward or making mistakes and walking away from God, you know, the Bible says that he's faithful and just to forgive us of all unrighteousness. That's whether you knew him or worshiped him or you're still curious about that. So if that sounds good to you, like something you want to know more about, hey, shoot us an email, shoot us a text. You just get in touch with us. We can point you in the right direction. But I'm really honored and thankful for those that have watched this show. And remember the words of Jesus when he said that he came to be a servant, the greatest among us, the greatest of all times, which all of us can be, is that if we serve, if we do something that's bigger than us, if we do things, and not just when the cameras are rolling, but when we know our Father in heaven, or God, who watches us and sees the heart and knows why we do those things, because when we do it in secret, he rewards us openly. So I pray that this episode really caught you in your time of need to minister to you and to help you to understand that sports and spiritual things do go hand in hand. And as we do continue to make these episodes and record them, you will see just that. May God bless you. May he keep you is my prayer. We'll see you real soon.